When we talk about older rundowns, we usually just remember the good times we spent playing it, looking back at all the people we've met during our LFGs and meme moments playing with friends. Just overall the beautiful times we spent down in the complex using all the specific gear we always get. But there's an issue when we portray those rundowns like they were perfect with no problem, especially when we have newcomers being worried if they miss something due to the nature of the rundown system and giving them this false sense of the rundown that they're currently playing is inferior in some way, shape or form. Usually it's the other way around. All features that were an introduction in the previous rundown are usually reused smartly or implemented in a more balanced way in the newer rundowns. Those new mechanics get better over time with the feedback that people gives during that rundown cycle. So if you're a newcomer watching this video, don't worry about missing content because 99% of it comes back in a rundown or two. Most you'll miss is a 2-minute audio log and some obscure email in a dark room somewhere in a D level, which you'll probably miss anyways, so you'll be fine. Us old players have to remember that the past is usually blurred by nostalgia, and we tend to remember things incorrectly. We usually give false information about older rundowns and exaggerating things. A good example of that would be the MR one-shotting in Rundown 1, which is simply not true. Another thing to remember is that over time, with more people playing this game and more people being more invested, we have learned the ins and out of the game, and the community is more active than ever. You see rare strats being more used commonly and knowledge being more spread out rather than contained with only select individuals knowing about it. Long story short is that the magic that we got all the way back from our 1 and 2 when almost nobody knew nothing is completely gone. So if you're a newcomer and you don't want to see people be hopping anywhere, you'll have to ask specifically for people who just got the game in the LFG in Discord, usually. So let's go down memory lane and criticize how bad things were actually back then. Rundown 2 is the darling of the people who played it, and it's personally when I started, so I have a soft spot to it, but it's a fucking joke when it comes to introducing the game to a beginner. If you thought R5 was bad, R2 was the king probably. If you were not a persistent bastard like I was back then, then you most likely quit the game back in the day. You go into A1, you get slapped with a class 2 and a class 4, and then you fight tooth and nail on that extraction and you barely survive and you win the match. But then you get slapped in the face again on B1 with a fucking class 9. A class 9 alarm. And it's the introduction to the hybrid and Bloodthirst 2. So it's a big fucking middle finger to you who just bought the game straight up. And yeah, I know with the tool set we have now and how things are, it doesn't sound too bad. But back then we didn't have tutorials, we didn't have info, and the only thing we knew was that putting a shotgun sentry behind a door was like the second coming of Jesus. It's the only thing that worked, and that's the only thing you were supposed to do. Rundown 2 simply failed at giving a sense of scaling difficulty because of the lack of A levels to introduce new mechanics to people, and even failing at transplanting mechanics from one level to another. For example, the air alarm was introduced in R2 Scene 2, and later put on R2E1, but in the most overwhelming way possible. You cannot really compare both of them because one spawns 4 enemies every like 30 seconds, the other one ramps up over time. At first starts with 3, then like 6, and then the next second you're on spawn cap and you're fighting search waves after search wave, and it's just fucking wild. So it's R2 as good as people remember? Well, not really. Lots of content in too short time, which lasted for 2 months, almost 2 months I think. And they even touched the broken spawns on speeders, which caused an entire room to be filled and making them spawn almost inside each other, which prevented you from going through a room without getting hit. Also, our 2D1 existed, the level that made you fuck die for like half of it, and with giants, and it was just an entire mess. I think people remember Rundown's 2 menacing aura more than anything. When everything was new and fresh, nobody really knew anything, and the short time allowed for people to not really look into the bad things a Rundown had. Rundown 3 is the most misunderstood rundowns out of every rundown in this game. Since it wasn't bad at all, it was action packed, it introduced new things like hell weaponry and mother. Well, if it wasn't so bad, then why is it here then? It lasted 5 months with 3 A levels. God damn! One of the A levels was a reactor, and it was probably the most boring level in GTFO until now. Not only it was too harsh for new players, but it was boring to hold and it had little to no replayability for experienced one. So people, once they completed that level, they just avoided it like the plague, because there was nothing to do after that one. I'm not against multiple A levels, but A3 was kind of bad, I'm not gonna lie to you. But this rundown didn't get an extension, nor did we had a warden restriction like in Rundown 2. I would love to blame the developers, but if I remember correctly, during that time they got bought by Tencent and they decided to expand the company. I understand why it took so long, but I do blame them for the radio silence that they had throughout those 5 months. Of course, as classic GTFO, something's gotta be slightly off balance, and that was the shotguns. They were pretty fucking bonkers. Like, so bonkers they overshadowed the hell weaponry that people were supposed to use in this small and narrow hallway level design that R3 was. So instead of a hell gun spam, it was mostly a combat shorty spam. I mean, tomato, tomato. Same thing, really. The only noteworthy bug was probably the speed bug, which caused the sleeper to be faster than they used to, because apparently they inherited the speed from the babies. That's the only explanation people had for it. And multiple moms responding on D1 if you resetted the lobby multiple times. But apart from that, R3 was overall a good rundown. It added so many things and had a little bit of lore in it, but due to the lack of content on the deeper levels and the absence of the devs, it made one of the best bite-sized rundowns into a long and boring one. Ah shit, the sleeper hit me so hard I went into R4, god damn it. Error, error, error. If you pay me $1 for every error alarm, you will pay me like $6, which is a lot really, that's a number 5 at McDonald's. Anyways, Rundown 4 added layered difficulty, which is supposed to increase the level of difficulty of a level and give options to players to pick and choose what difficulty they want. But their idea of increasing difficulty was just slap 4 strikers every 30 seconds to every single level, except maybe C3. Some levels pull those off really well, like R4D2, but the previous levels are kinda ass, A2 and A3 being a good example of it. Both A levels starts an error alarm and you gotta put a command in a terminal, which is literally just a copy and paste, but A3 does a better job by putting the scout at the end of the zone, rather than, you know, putting it behind the bulkhead that takes 20 seconds to open, which then triggers the scout because you couldn't go through the door fast enough, forcing you to fight 2 scout waves because the door took 20 seconds to open. Almost every single level in this rundown has a layer part, which just adds nothing to the level. C1 is a great example of this. The uplink on extreme added nothing to the level. It doesn't change the fog, it doesn't change the error alarm at the end. You do the uplink or you're done, deviating all tension that came from looking through the glass door staring at the tank. They could have made that high only just slightly harder and removed the extreme, so people would focus more on the tank encounter rather than how are we gonna permafoam this 12 uplink command. Gun balancing was a funny thing too. They added Hell Revo, which was busted as hell, and burst cancelling was taking the meta by storm. One broken primary and one broken special. Overall, the biggest issue in my opinion with R4 was that the layer didn't impact the levels as much and added padding to the levels. Don't get me wrong, a lot of the levels were fun, but they could have used the layer system to make the levels more iconic and make better levels overall with them, instead of just slapping an objective and maybe an error alarm and call it a day. Gun balancing could have been better too. Maybe Hell Revo could have get half the ammo and put into the special slot, and Burst Cannon could have do less damage overall so it doesn't break the game. I still remember when they tried to fix burst cancelling, but they ended up breaking the melee system and we had to cancel our hammer by pulling the hack tool. Like, that was hilarious. They tried to fix one thing and they broke another. So Dragon, what about R5? Well, R5 feels what R4 should have been, because here the layer difficulty actually adds to the level, it gives it some charisma. C2 for example is a goddamn good level compared to the previous C2, which was just long. So comparing it to previous rundowns, I say R5 is probably the most fun you can have in this game right now. But I still blame the developers for not adding the Snatcher, because you teased it the previous rundown, but it doesn't show up in here. So I guess we'll have to wait for rundown 6 or to version 1.0 to see at least an actual new enemy. Because even if they reuse everything that we have right now in a more thoughtful way, doesn't remove the fact that it's still the same thing that we previously have, and everything kinda acts the same. There really isn't any new enemies that actually change the gameplay flow and how we play. We didn't have any tools throughout the whole a year, maybe two, that this game came out, and there's no evolution gameplay wise that this game had, apart from maybe funneling with hell weaponry, but that's just about it. My point with this video is that all the rundowns are not necessarily the best. First introduction to mechanics are not usually the best ones. I just compare R2. If you wanna look at a more present example, it'll be the respawn cocoons in R5, which people kinda hated it because of the way that it was implemented. So if you're a new person who just bought the game and you're playing with a pub and the guy is like, yeah, I play in R1, I put a shotgun sentry behind the door, you know, like, just say yes, just nod your head and keep playing the game. Like, don't let him sell you that the previous rundown were like the best thing ever, because 9 times out of 10 everything was just blinded by nostalgia there. Man, this took me a long ass while to finish. But hey, it's 1 AM and I'm ready to render, baby. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, you know, thank you. Thank you for holding up until this 10-minute mark. I would have touched on a lot of other topics too, but I just didn't want to make the video too long. Like, I would have loved to go into details about like the gun balancing and how stuff worked back then on some other stuff too, like shadow giants running at 50 miles an hour and stuff like that, but yeah, thank you for watching and see you in the next one.